The sky was apparent. Summer sunlight in New Orleans filtered through the dense canopy of trees, shading the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Luxury cars sat quietly in front of million-dollar mansions. The distant hum of a lawnmower echoed somewhere nearby, and the air seemed saturated with the scent of fragrant wood drifting from the porches of grand old homes. At the heart of this perfect scene, a black man lay stretched out on a lounge chair beside a swimming pool. Eyes half closed, a glass of iced tea in hand, savoring each peaceful second. His name was Danny Glover, a former police officer with 2 decades of unwavering service in law enforcement. He had patrolled the darkest corners of New Orleans and faced danger, crime, and prejudice. Now, all he wanted was to live a quiet life. In the home he had traded his youth to earn, his vast, pristine, and crystal-clear pool was his most treasured jewel. But Danny had no idea that in just a few minutes, this place would become the scene of an incident the entire neighborhood would never forget. Rhett! A piercing police siren shattered the peaceful air like a knife slicing through silk. 2 police cars raced up and screeched to a halt at the mansion's gate. Car doors flung open. 2 officers stepped out, hands on their holsters, eyes sharp, as if they were about to apprehend a high-level fugitive. "Sir," one officer said, his voice cold, "we received a report about a suspicious black male trespassing at the pool at this address." Danny shot up from his seat. For a brief moment his heart tightened, but his gaze remained calm, almost as if he was used to this. He didn't even have to look. He already knew. Behind the sheer white curtain across the street, a familiar gaze was watching, a smug smile just beginning to show. Karen Thompson, neighbor, and the enemy in the shadows, a woman who couldn't stand the idea of a black man living next door to her, let alone owning the dream mansion. But this time, she had gone too far, and Danny was ready. 2 months earlier. Danny Glover had just officially moved into the Garden Oaks neighborhood, known for its quiet exclusivity and predominantly white residents. For many, the sight of a black man appearing here, not as a gardener or a chauffeur, was already enough to make them uncomfortable. Danny knew that, but he didn't care. This house resulted from nearly 20 years of service, discipline, and silent endurance. He had seen every side of society, the heroic and the despicable. Now, he wanted a home where he could read, grill meat, and occasionally hear children laughing in the backyard. As he was arranging chairs by the pool on his first afternoon, the feeling of being watched made him pause. He looked up, and just as he suspected, on the 2nd floor of the house across the street, a woman was pressed up against the window, blonde hair, silk dress, phone to her ear, her eyes scrutinized. Her expression was unmistakably displeased. Danny politely smiled and raised his hand in a small wave, a goodwill gesture. The woman immediately drew the curtains and disappeared behind the frosted glass. The next day, while Danny was shopping for gardening tools at a local store, his phone buzzed repeatedly. Notifications from the newly installed security system. When he opened the footage, what he saw left him speechless. Karen Thompson, the woman from the 2nd floor window, was stepping into his backyard through the side gate he hadn't yet locked. She wasn't sneaking in. Quite the opposite. She moved as if the place belonged to her. With the air of someone on vacation, she casually spread a towel on the poolside chair, slipped off her sandals, and dipped her feet into Danny's crystal-clear water. When Danny returned home and stepped outside, Karen lounged under the patio umbrella, holding a glass of orange juice from his kitchen. Seeing him, she gently set the glass down and offered a dry smile. "Oh, I thought you were the new pool guy. The last family let me use the pool freely." Danny tightened his grip on the bag in his hand, but his voice remained calm. "I'm sorry, but I'm the new owner here, and from now on, If you want to use any part of this property, I suggest you ask for my permission first." Karen frowned, then looked him up and down. Her gaze carried both disdain and surprise. "You're the owner?" she sneered. "There must be some mistake. I know the agent who sold this house. She didn't say anything about—" She stopped. Didn't finish the sentence, but Danny understood, all too well. "There's no mistake," Danny said, locking eyes with her. "You are trespassing. I won't allow this to happen again." Karen stood, hastily gathering her things. Before leaving, she muttered sharply, a warning wrapped in venom. "Just wait." Danny didn't move, didn't respond, but deep down, he already knew. This wouldn't be the last time he'd see this woman cross the line. Just a few weeks after their first confrontation, Danny Glover began to realize that Karen wasn't just your average troublesome neighbor. She was a quiet storm, calm on the surface, but ready to tear through every boundary if no one stopped her. Danny awoke to soft music drifting in from the backyard one Saturday morning. He frowned and checked the clock. 9:12 a.m. The sound wasn't coming from the neighbor's property. It was coming from his backyard. He walked to the second-floor window and blinked twice at what he saw. Karen Thompson, 4 other women, champagne, pastries, inflatable floats, and bikinis, right in his pool. Danny took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He stepped out to the yard, voice deep and steady, yet firm. "What are you all doing here?" Karen turned around, still holding her glass of wine as if she were at a 5-star resort that she sponsored. "Oh, you're being way too serious. We're just enjoying a little sunshine. This pool barely ever gets used." One of the guests, a brunette in a designer swimsuit, whispered. Karen said she had the right to use it. Danny cut in, his eyes locked on Karen. "This is private property. No one has the right to use it without my permission." There was a moment of silence before Karen set her glass down on the table, arms crossed. "Go ahead and call the police if you want. I know plenty of people in the department. My husband plays golf with the chief of police." Danny gave a soft chuckle, a smile, but not a happy one. "Well then, I'm sure they'll enjoy seeing what I'm about to record." That afternoon, Danny installed 2 additional security cameras around the house, the kind used in criminal investigations during his years on the force. He remembered something an old colleague once told him. When bullies know they're being watched, they either back down or destroy themselves. Danny hoped Karen would choose the first option, but he was more than ready for the second. After the uninvited pool party, things should have stopped. But for Karen Thompson, failure wasn't the end. It was a reason to escalate. At first, Danny noticed only small things. His morning newspaper began disappearing regularly, even though the delivery man swore it was left in the correct spot. The red rosebush he had planted when he moved in began to wilt mysteriously, despite the automatic watering system working perfectly. On the neighborhood's Facebook group, anonymous posts began to appear, filled with veiled hostility. Someone new just moved into the neighborhood. Seems suspicious. I've seen unfamiliar people hanging around the pool area a lot lately. Be careful. Danny didn't have to guess who was behind it. He checked the security cameras and wasn't surprised to see footage of Karen sneaking into his yard at 6 a.m., gently placing something at the base of the rosebush. On another day, she was tiptoeing up to his porch and slipping his newspaper into her designer handbag, like she was pocketing a piece of jewelry. Danny didn't act immediately. He recorded everything, every frame, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. Then came Karen's next move. At the monthly HOA meeting, Karen stood up in the crowded room and spoke in a tone of false formality. "I'm truly concerned about the property values in this neighborhood. Recently, there have been changes that are making potential buyers uneasy. Some people no longer feel safe here." She glanced in Danny's direction, the implication unmistakable. The room went silent. Danny slowly stood, phone in hand. "Interesting that you bring up property value, Mrs. Thompson," he said calmly. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The previous Tuesday, he played a nighttime video from his camera. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. The screen showed Karen sneaking around his flower bed, sprinkling herbicide along the base of the plants. A ripple of gasps echoed through the room. A few jaws dropped. Karen froze, her face drained of color. She stammered, I was just checking if someone was vandalizing. I heard strange noises." Danny didn't have to say another word. The eyes of the neighbors said it all. But the story didn't end there. That night, returning home from the meeting, Danny stepped into his backyard and found his entire pool filled with dish soap. Bubbles overflowed the rim, sparkling under the glow of the garden lights. He sighed, but instead of getting angry, he smiled, because his plan, the lesson Karen would never forget, had just been activated. He wasn't angry when Danny stood before his pool filled with bubbles. He stood silently, watching the foam drift lazily across the surface, then turned and walked back inside. In over 20 years as a police officer, he had faced some of the most dangerous criminals. But perhaps none had required such a meticulous plan as Karen Thompson. Sitting in his small home office overlooking the backyard, Danny recalled a story from an old colleague. It was an investigation involving a non-toxic pool dye, used to detect water leaks. The interesting part? This dye only activated when it came into contact with certain compounds in luxury sunscreen and high-end cosmetics. The idea struck Danny like a lightning bolt on a stormy night. He began his research. The dye had to be completely safe, non-toxic, but leave a distinct visible color, taking days to fade. Most importantly, it would only react when exposed to the exact type of cosmetics Karen and her wealthy circle loved to use. After several late nights poring over documents and ordering from a specialty supplier, Danny tested the formula in a small bucket, using a sunscreen Karen had once left behind on a pool chair. The result? Perfect. A bright, unmistakable green, harmless but absolutely ridiculous. Danny chuckled, the first time he had genuinely smiled since moving to New Orleans. He proceeded with the plan using the precision of a seasoned investigator. Installed 3 hidden cameras around the pool for full coverage, mixed the dye in exact proportions, and injected it into the pool's filtration system. The water remained crystal clear, odorless, and invisible. Then, he waited, and as if fate were on his side, Danny overheard Karen speaking in the backyard. "He's usually gone all day Saturday. Trust me, bring your best bikini. That pool is worth every second." That was the invitation he'd been waiting for. On Saturday morning, Danny pretended to leave for the day, but instead parked down the street, snuck in through the side gate, and took a position in his office with the security monitors ready. 2 p.m. A soft ping from the camera. The back gate creaked open, and like a scene playing out again, Karen appeared, wine glass in hand, a towel draped over one arm, designer sunglasses in place, followed by 6 friends, all familiar faces from the previous pool incident. They laughed, played jazz music, poured champagne into flutes, rubbed expensive sunscreen onto their arms, shoulders, and faces. Then, one by one, jumped into the cool water. Danny watched from the screen. No anger, no sadness. He sat, sipping his coffee, waiting for a specific color to emerge, and soon enough, the truth would glow like neon under a midnight sky. The New Orleans sky was crystal blue, as if it had no idea that a small seismic event was taking shape in Danny Glover's backyard. 2:17 p.m. A scream shattered the peaceful afternoon. "Karen, your hand. What color is that?" From the computer screen, Danny watched the chain reaction unfold like a scene out of a dark comedy. One of Karen's friends, Susan, raised her hand under the sunlight. Her once pale skin was now turning into a glowing turquoise green. Not just her hands, but also her shoulders and legs, anywhere she had applied that $100 Chanel sunscreen. Karen turned toward her. "What the hell?" She stopped mid-sentence when she looked at her own hands. A blinding neon green glowed across her skin, like it had been painted with a highlighter. From her wrists to her elbows, the color deepened by the second. "Oh my God!" Karen screamed, frantically scanning her surroundings. "What is happening?" Another woman, one preparing to attend her daughter's wedding next week, cried out through sobs, "My legs! I can't show up in photos like this." The scene descended into chaos, like a failed circus act. One woman yanked a towel over her head. Another frantically tried to scrub her hands in the pool water, which only made her greener. And Karen stood frozen, too stunned to speak, staring at her skin that now resembled a St. Patrick's Day float character. And then, her eyes caught something. Just above the fence, a tiny camera, its red light blinking steadily. Karen's eyes widened. "He's recording! He's recording!" But it was far too late. The 6 green-stained women scrambled to gather their things. Towels, designer bags, bottles of champagne, and heels, fleeing in panic, leaving behind a trail of bright green footprints like a runway from a summer fashion disaster. Danny, from inside the house, calmly picked up his phone, pressed save video. The perfect plan. No confrontation, no shouting, just letting karma do her job. It took only 4 hours. The first video was posted on TikTok by a teenage girl who lived across from Danny's house. A clip filmed from her second-floor bedroom, capturing 6 women running chaotically, their skin a vivid green, like spa zombies escaping a botched facial. Background music. The same light jazz played during Karen's party. Title: When Karen Forgot to Ask, and Karma Visited the Pool. Views after 6 hours, 1.8 million. At the same time, Danny uploaded footage from his security cameras, but this version was meticulously edited. Karen entered the gate without knocking. Close-up of her applying luxury brand sunscreen, Karen screaming as her skin changes color in the pool. And the final shot. Danny watching calmly from his upstairs window, sipping coffee. White text on a black screen faded in at the end. "Sorry, this pool doesn't serve privilege." By nightfall, the video had been shared across Reddit, Instagram, and Facebook, and even appeared on the New Orleans local news. 9 o'clock broadcast. An unusual incident in the upscale neighborhood of Garden Oaks. A group of individuals was dyed green after trespassing in the private pool of retired police officer and current tech investor Danny Glover. The hashtag #, Green Karen, began trending. Netizens flooded the internet with memes, turning Karen into a fashion-forward Hulk. One account photoshopped her listing a house with the tagline, "Urgent sale, skin no longer matches interior." Once a well-known real estate agent in New Orleans, Karen had her entire portfolio of active listings suspended by her firm. Her Facebook page was overwhelmed by a storm of green heart emojis. Comments from potential clients included, "If she can't respect someone else's property boundaries, how can I trust her to help me buy a home?" And Danny. He said nothing. No press interviews, no live streams, no self-defense statements. He posted a single photo on Instagram, a shot of the pool at sunset, the golden light gently dancing on the still water. Caption: Sometimes justice doesn't need to knock. It knows the way in. If anyone thought Karen Thompson would quietly disappear after her green-faced karma moment, they had overestimated her sense of dignity. Karen still clung desperately to her image, as if the green stains on her skin had never existed. But that very effort became the final trap she set for herself. Karen posted a clarifying video to her page 1 week after the pool incident. In the clip, she sat in front of a camera, backed by a white bookshelf and a lotus flower painting, a staged attempt at serenity. A faint green hue was still visible on her forehead and neck, but she didn't mention it. I was only trying to uphold community standards. And if I happened to step into that pool, it was a misunderstanding, not malice. But the internet did not have it. Within 2 hours, the clip had amassed thousands of mocking comments. Community standards. Walking into someone's house like it's Target. Ma'am, you're glowing green and giving a TED Talk on morality. Greenwashing gone wrong. The video became a meme, and her line, "I was only trying to uphold standards," got remixed into a viral dance track on TikTok. Meanwhile, things were far worse at the real estate office where Karen worked. 3 major clients canceled their contracts. The company received over 300 complaint emails. A local news outlet even called to ask, "Does your firm endorse employees breaking into private property and damaging community trust?" The next day, the company issued an internal notice. "We are temporarily suspending agent Karen Thompson, pending an internal review. We remain committed to respecting all residents' privacy and property rights." Back in Garden Oaks, a strange silence settled around Karen's house. No more book club socials or morning tea parties with the affluent white ladies. No more barking dogs in the afternoon. No more Karen yelling when kids kicked soccer balls near her fence. One neighbor whispered, "She disappeared like a ghost, except for that green stain on her reputation that one might never fade." And Danny? He remained calm, as still as the surface of his pool. But everything around him was beginning to shift dramatically. The residents of Garden Oaks began talking to him more. Those who once stayed silent when Karen spread false accusations now stood beside him at HOA meetings. From someone once viewed with suspicion, Danny Glover became a new pillar of unity in the neighborhood. And Karen, the more she tried to explain herself, the more the very community she once tried to control turned its back on her. Saturday morning. Sunlight filtered through the towering oaks of Garden Oaks, casting dappled rays on the red brick walkway that stretched from the pool to Danny Glover's house. A few children were laughing by the pool. The smell of grilled meat from Danny's BBQ lingered down the block. That sound, laughter, playful shouts, splashing water, had never echoed this much since he first moved in. And that day, something extraordinary happened. The September neighborhood meeting, held at the common area near Danny's home, had its highest turnout ever. Over 80% of residents showed up. The air tightened like a pulled string when Karen stepped up to the podium. She wore a pale green dress, perfectly curled hair, and deep red lipstick. But no one had forgotten what had happened, especially since more than a few attendees still had the Green Karen video saved on their phones. "I would like to share a few concerns about safety and standards in our community," she began, her voice trembling slightly. But the moment she finished, a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "It's not easy. Being green." The courtyard fell utterly silent. Then it erupted into laughter, not wild or mocking, but the kind of restrained chuckle that had been held back for far too long, a collective sigh of relief. Karen's face flushed crimson, her words stumbled, and she cut her speech short, stepping off the stage in a hurry, past the sympathetic gazes of the few who still supported her. Then, something unexpected happened. Danny stood up, not to mock, not to retaliate, but to share. "I don't need anyone to take sides. I just want to live in a community where people listen and respect one another. No microphone, no raised voice." He spoke with calm, strength, and sincerity. The air shifted, quieter now, thoughtful. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly Latina neighbor from down the street, raised her hand. "I want to thank you, Danny. You reminded me why I chose to live here in the first place. Not for the pool or the scenery, but because I hoped this could be a real community." Others followed. The Johnson family recalled how Karen, once demanded their son's basketball hoop be removed. An elderly man shared how she called the police on him for planting bougainvillea that was too colorful. And as those small stories came together, they painted a clearer, more accurate portrait of Karen Thompson. As the meeting ended, many people shook Danny's hand. Several parents thanked him for making the neighborhood safer for their children. One middle-aged man, while pouring water, leaned over and said, "You know, the moment you stayed silent and just started installing cameras, that's when you won." And then, the unexpected. The following day, inside Danny's mailbox was a handwritten letter. The scribbled note on the envelope read, "From Karen, Monday morning." The sky over New Orleans was apparent. A gentle breeze made the leaves sway softly in the yard. Danny Glover had just finished brewing his coffee when he noticed an envelope neatly tucked into his front mailbox. Written in purple ink on the front, "To Mr. Glover, from Karen." He frowned. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter, thicker than usual. Danny picked it up and hesitated for a few seconds. Then he opened it. 3 handwritten pages, the writing neat, but slightly shaky. The contents read, "Danny, I'm writing this not to justify myself, but to admit the truth. When you moved in, I felt like I was losing control. I had grown used to everything in this neighborhood happening the way I thought was right. I didn't realize the stability I claimed to protect was rooted in control and bias. I couldn't handle the fact that someone like you, polite, educated, respected, made me feel small. Instead of learning from that, I chose to attack. I went too far. I trespassed on your space, lied, fabricated stories, and even dragged others into it. Your retaliation, if I may call it that, was, in fact, the most profound lesson I've ever received. When my skin turned green, the world laughed. But I wasn't angry because they laughed at me. I was angry because they saw the real person I had tried so hard to hide. I've lost a lot, my reputation, friends, career, and home. But perhaps I deserved that. The only thing I ask is that you know I've truly reflected. And if you can't forgive me, I understand. Thank you for not responding with hate, but with patience. Karen." Danny read the final line, then quietly folded the letter. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. Instead, he walked out into the backyard. The pool shimmered crystal clear. Neighborhood kids were gathering, ready for another swim lesson with him. He glanced toward the now empty house where Karen once lived. Has she truly changed? Or is this just the last low note before another storm? He didn't know. And perhaps he didn't need to. What mattered more was this. Danny had remained true to himself. And instead of letting hatred take over, he offered his community a lasting example of calm, intelligence, and grace. 1 month after Karen's letter arrived, the Crescent Oaks neighborhood was no longer the same. Not because someone left, but because the community had finally learned to open its heart, thanks to a man they once only watched from afar, Danny Glover. From a so-called controversial new resident, Danny had become the center of respect, not because he raised his voice, but because he chose to resist with dignity. Small changes began to appear throughout the neighborhood. The Rodriguez family from down the street began bringing Danny a basket of empanadas every weekend. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled and said, "I still remember when she mocked my Christmas tree for being too Latin. Now I hang a Puerto Rican flag in the window, and I know you get it." The Johnson family, once silent when Karen criticized their son's basketball hoop, now proudly displayed a sign in their yard. Play area, free for all kids. The once exhausting HOA meetings, which dragged on with petty complaints, became short, friendly, and productive. No more gripes about paint colors too bright, Christmas lights too flashy, or kids too noisy. People laughed more, chatted more. Danny's pool had become more than a place to relax. It became the heart of the neighborhood. Every weekend, Danny hosted free swimming lessons for the local children. On Saturdays, he invited families over for BBQ and honest conversations. He hung a small sign at the pool gate, "Pool open to all, just ask first." A short line, but filled with meaning. Right next to the pool stood a small photo frame, subtle, but loaded with quiet symbolism. A snapshot of a group of women running in panic through the neighborhood. Their skin dyed a brilliant green. No caption, just a tiny symbol beneath it. Karma. When guests saw the photo, Danny would smile and say, "It's a long story, but it ends well." Just recently, a local news reporter came to interview Danny for a segment called Inspiring Residents of New Orleans. When asked how he felt after everything that had happened, Danny smiled. "I didn't do anything grand. I just refused to let wrong lead me down the same path." That answer left the reporter momentarily speechless, because he understood. In a noisy world, Danny's quiet strength and unwavering grace changed everything. While Danny was brewing coffee in his tiny kitchen one crisp autumn morning, an email popped up from a national news station. Subject line, "The Pool Story, How Change Began with One Calm Act." The viral video of the infamous green pool party, which Danny had once uploaded, had now made its way across the country. News outlets picked up the story, not just for the humor, but because it touched something deeper. How a black man faced prejudice with grace and intellect. In a live interview, the anchor asked, "Were you angry when it all started? When Karen tried to strip away your peace simply because of your skin color?" Danny sipped his tea, eyes calm. "Of course, I was angry. But I knew that if I let that anger explode incorrectly, it would only burn me up inside. I chose a different path. I chose to let them reveal their character." A few weeks later, Danny received an unexpected letter. No name was on the envelope, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside, a shaky handwritten note read, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I felt I needed to say this. I was wrong. Wrong to think I had special privileges just because I lived here first. Wrong to think you didn't belong here simply because of your skin. You handled things with more grace than I've ever shown. I hope this new place gives me a chance to start over. Karen." But not long after, Karen was once again in the news, this time for an incident in her new neighborhood where she harassed an Asian American family for using the tennis court without asking. Danny read the article and smiled, not out of spite, not with satisfaction, just understanding. Some people need more than one lesson, and some people don't learn at all. 1 year passed. The Crescent Oaks neighborhood had transformed into a warm, harmonious community. Every weekend, laughter echoed from Danny's backyard pool. Children, adults, black, white, brown, all blended as one. At the wooden gate that led into the backyard, a new sign was mounted. "This isn't just a pool. It's where kindness is kept alive." In his final video, Danny stood before the camera, the shimmering sunlit pool behind him. If you've ever faced prejudice, remember this. Sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight back to win. You must stand your ground and let the truth do the rest. And with that, the story ends, but a reminder begins. Dare to speak. Dare to be patient. Dare to be kind, even to those who may not deserve it. If this story moved you, share it. And if you've ever had a Karen in your life, don't forget, karma always knows how to swim.